Sports Pavilion and Bowling Committee meeting. Today is March the 12th. It's 1:30 in the afternoon, and we're in Sun City, West Arizona. My name is Dick Rhodes. I'm the chairman of this committee. At this point, I need to, I'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. We have one of our members that's online, so all of our members are present at the meeting today. Let's go ahead, let's stand if you can, and we'll pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to read the standard meeting procedures statement. The governing board and its committees conduct all of their meetings in compliance with the Arizona Community Association open meeting laws per Arizona Statute 33-1804 and in concert with the RCSCW bylaws, policies, and standing rules. Parliamentary procedures as outlined in the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order will also be followed in all meetings as appropriate, consistent with Bylaw 3.07, Procedures for Owner-Member Meetings, and Standing Rules number 1 and number 3. Thank you. I'm going to present the minutes of the meeting from February the 5th. And if there's no changes or comments on that, that will stand as printed. Thank you. Our first item will be item 3.01, and it's going to be our Sports and Pavilion Bowling Managers Report. Mr. Gary Zarek. Good afternoon, Mr. Zarek.
Good afternoon, Director Rhodes. How are you?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Rudy. We're running out of committee meetings. What do we have? 2 more? I think that's it. Maybe 3.
Maybe.
So up on the screen is the pavilion schedule for open play as to what has happened in the month of February. Obviously, everybody can see that the bowling center has been quite busy. We are up on league games. Non-league games. By the way, the non-league game number was mistakenly put in at the wrong amount of games. That number should be corrected to 7,493. So we actually had a 1.1% increase. When I saw that number, I was like, what the heck happened here? So that number is just incorrect on that screen, but it has already been fixed in the results. So everybody knows. So open bowling has been up, league games are up, and total games bowled are down a little bit, but still doing very, very well. Billiards, it's seasonal, and I think you're going to see that now. The billiard room has been extremely busy over the last several weeks. I think we have gotten a lot more spring training people in to watch the baseball games. Our summer break people are in, and it just looks like there's a much more interest in the billiard room. So I think that number is going to just take care of itself shortly. I think the next slide will be the Lizard Acres Lounge. And the lounge has been doing progressively better since December. It continues to go up in revenue. And I believe that a lot of that's got to do with also more residents attending, and also the bands. People are very excited about the bands that we've had in there lately, and I think you can see that by the revenue. It is substantially up versus what you saw in November and December. And that is
cost of goods sold, everything on that line is a negative. Could you explain that to me?
Cost of goods, I believe, is all of the things that we purchase as far as beer, wine, every product that is included in those numbers.
Okay, so this is actually,
Yes.
if this were a P&L, that would be on the inventory side.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Do any of the committee members have a question at all? Does anyone in the audience have a question? And I don't think we have anyone online. Let's see if we can do this. We should see it there. I make no comment about our technical capacity here. So we do have contact. Let me just, as a point, Mr. Falcone, are you on by chance? He's not. Okay. Does it appear that we have contact with the website? This is a question to our IT staff. Where? Yeah, but you should see it. Okay, we're going to proceed. Okay, our next item is new business, and again, this is going to be for Mr. Zarek. It's going to be the proposed FY2025-26 capital improvement and the R&R for $50,000 plus for the Sports Pavilion. Mr. Zarek?
Director Rhodes, all of the capital improvement projects have not changed over the course of the last year, I would imagine. Everything is there. If we could get a slide up, maybe we could take a look at it. I'm not sure we can do that. Perfect. So that is everything that has been on the capital improvements the entire year, and nothing has changed. It is all the same. As a matter of fact, I think we took a tour and we walked the whole facility to let everybody know what was the intended upgrades going on for model year July of 2026.
So thank you very much. One note for the committee. If we look at this, there's going to be three categories that we need to pay particular attention to. One of which is the category under $50,000. And there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 under 50,000. Okay, those the manager has the authority to approve anything up to $50,000. So we won't be reviewing that. Now we will look at anything from $50,000 to $100,000, and we have the responsibility to make sure that we understand it. And if appropriate, we could recommend that it be pulled out. Now I will remind everyone that we did tour the bowling alley, and Mr. Zarek was kind enough to provide a very thorough and comprehensive explanation and demonstration of the equipment that's in question. So we will want to, if we don't agree with that, with leaving it in, we're going to have to make a recommendation to the governing board to pull it out. But my sense is that we've looked at that and we're comfortable with it. Now, every one of you, all the committee members, have to resign yourself or answer that question. You know, are we comfortable with that? So, and if we are, we won't have to make any kind of a recommendation whatsoever. And then the final one is going to be anything over $100,000, and that's the GSX pin sitters, and that's $892,000. And if I'm not mistaken, Gary, was it 40 of those that we have? 40 of the pin setters that we're replacing?
30.
30, okay, I was off. So, and those are very old, and we have issues with availability and reliability on that, and availability of spare parts. So we'll also want to have, if everyone is happy with that, then we'll just let it be, and it'll go to the governing board. So we're not going to do that right now, but I did want to make sure that everyone on the committee understands it. Does everyone understand that, Sherry? Debbie, you understand that? Gloria, Carol, Mr. Kalkner, thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and we're going to proceed to Mr. Swan, the 25-26 operating budget. And Cliff, would you take this over for us?
Thank you, Director Rhodes. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, audience. Nice to see some of my budget and finance brethren here from the Budget and Finance Committee. We're going to go over the Sports Pavilion Division budget and spent significant time with Gary and his team coming up with this budget, and we feel really good about it. And we haven't really implemented any bowling rate increases since budget year 2023. So you'll see some recommendations in here for increases, and we'll get to that soon. But let's get started. So, you know, our overall goals of our budget every year are listed here. Essentially, the number one goal is to keep the place looking nice. That Sports Pavilion facility is one of a kind for communities, and we want to make sure that it's in great shape, just like everything else around here. So that's always a goal of our budget, is to keep the place looking nice. Secondly, you know, we want to make sure that we're charging rates responsibly so that we're helping to fund our reserve fund. And ultimately, the cash from operations that is left over goes into our reserve fund, which helps us with the repair and replacement of things like pin setters. When you have approximately $900,000 for 30 pin setters, you need to have money set aside for that. And part of the budgeting process is to make sure that we look at all of our rates so that there's excess at the end of the year to help feed that reserve fund. And so this budget does that. Another large component of our budget, or the goal of our budget, is to make sure that we're investing in enhancements and new capital as well. So I would say there's no new capital in this one for Sports Pavilion, but an example of that was last year when we budgeted to do an enhancement to the Lizard Acres. So, and when we budget, we always look at ways that we can keep our place vibrant and exciting, and for the new generations coming into this community. So this budget does that. And then finally, you know, we want to continue not only to provide the services we provide, but to do those at a high standard. And we put this budget together. So if we look at the current year, we like to project out how we're going to finish for the current year, so that becomes the baseline for our budget for the following year. We have a process where we look at our 6-month year-to-date, which for us is December. We take our financials through December, and then we forecast the last 6 months of the year, which can be, you know, a little, you know, kind of crystal ball-y. You know, we don't know for sure, especially when it comes to, you know, retail and things like that, what's going to happen in the market and the economy. We've got some pretty good, we've got 40 years of history that we can go back on and look and see how we've done in those last 6 months. But we take a look at those last 6 months, forecast out our revenue, as well as look at our expense line items and see where we're at year to date, whether the savings that we currently have are going to materialize at the end of the year, or whether the overages we currently have are going to even out over the year. And then we put that projection together. So from the top line, or the revenue perspective, we've got approximately $1,129,000 in this budget, and we think we're going to end up at $1,077,000, and approximately $48,000 increase to budget in our projection, which is good. mainly due to just bowling lineage. I mean, Gary's made some changes in the bowling center, and it's become very popular. And we're looking at 20,000 more lines of bowling than we had in this budget, which we think we're going to get by the end of the year, and that's the main reason for the increase. On the expense side, we've got these categories here. Largest category is going to be our labor, of course, but overall, we anticipate a little overage in our expenses of 23,000. Essentially, you can look at those expense line items, and that's how we're coming in. Repairs and maintenance is probably the biggest one, I would say. That's mainly, I mean, we did some pool table enhancements and refurbishments that we decided to take advantage of this year. But another large component of that repairs and maintenance is those pin setters. I mean, they're old, and they have met their useful life, and we're spending a ton of time repairing those and resources and parts. So that's what's causing that overage in that one expense line item. But overall, we'll finish the year, you'll see, favorable by 26 or so thousand. So if we look at the org chart, our org chart in our sports pavilion, obviously we got Gary at the top, and then his team underneath him. We've got 29 positions that make up about 16 FTEs. So when we take the hours of those 29 positions and equate them to a full-time employee, it works out to be about 16 FTEs. So 29 positions, 16 FTEs. Pretty consistent over time. The jump there from 22 is when we started Lizard Acres, and that required some additional resources in terms of employees or FTEs, so that we were making sure that we had the coverage there that we should. But as you can see, no change in the FTE count for 5-year trend for the sports pavilion. So if we look at in the budget, we've got $843,000 for wages, a 2% increase in wages and benefits. That 17,000 is made up of that. 14,000 of that is tied to our wages and taxes and retirement. If we look at that, we have a wage increase impact from the prior year. So when we're comparing the projected to the budget, there's an increase simply because of the wage increases that we put in for the 6 months. It'll be the last 6 months of calendar year 2025 compared to the prior year projection. That can get a little wonky, so if you don't understand what I just said, meet me afterwards. I'll tell you what that means. And then if you look at we put a 4% increase overall to address our employees when it comes to the end of the year when we do our merit increases, where they can get up to a 4% increase, and then as well as to address any inconsistencies in job descriptions and jobs if we have to go out to market and look at those positions. It allows us some flexibility there to be able to address those concerns. But overall, 2% increase in the sports pavilion, we're sitting pretty good there. And then minimum wage is gonna hit us with we budgeted a 50-cent increase for the last 6 months of next year, which would be January through June of 2026. We put that in his budget. And then our workers' comp, we did a whole presentation on workers' comp. I encourage you to watch the March 4th Budget and Finance Committee meeting for some real, if you really like things like E-mods and such and insurance rates, we had a really good presentation. What I'll say about our workers' comp from that presentation is that we're trending in the right direction. Our claims ratios have been down for the last 2 years. We had one bad year in 2022, and that was coming out of COVID, and I believe that was pretty typical of all businesses. So we're still kind of paying for that, but our E-mod is a 3-year window, and unfortunately, it goes 1 year back. So right now we're looking at 21, 22, and 23 in our E-mod. When 22 drops out, if we continue the trend that we're on, we'll actually get a decrease in our rates. But at this time, 2022 is still hitting us. So anyway, an increase for workers' comp is in that 14,000 as well. And then 3,000 increase, this is 8% increase in our health insurance. And now the second meeting in February, we had a presentation on our health insurance. I believe it was the 2nd of February, if you want to go back and reference that in budget and finance, if you want some more details. So, looking at the other operating expense, so we've got labor, obviously, is our largest, like I said earlier, but we have other operating expenses like utilities and repairs and maintenance. And in this budget, we've got a increase in those areas, a little bit of an increase in those areas as well. You'll see, we'll go down through those categories right now where there's some big impacts. So there's an overall 9% increase in operating expenses, so non-payroll related. So total increase is 4%, but in the non-payroll related area, there's a 9% increase. And these are very strategic things that we want to do and plan for, and kind of address some areas in the sports pavilion that need to be addressed. And then, so one of those areas is in our repairs and maintenance. We've got a 12,000 increase. Part of this is just due to increase maintenance to those pin setters. Those pin setters won't be replaced until probably July of 2026. So we'll have to continue to maintain those throughout this budget cycle. And those are becoming more expensive. So that's part of the reason for the increase. The other increase is really tied to just trying to keep the place up, and we want to add an additional, do an additional carpet cleaning in there, because I feel like it'll help us get more useful life out of that carpet. So we want to do that. One of the other things is in the billiards room, we'd really like to dress that place up a little bit better. Some of the walls need to be painted, and there's some furniture that we also want to replace in there. So we're going to invest some money in the billiards room a little bit more to make it up to snuff with the rest of the facility. And then on the equipment side, the fans in there are looking a little dated, so we'd like to replace the fans. So between the fans and resurfacing some more pool tables, there's a 5,000 increase there in the repairs and maintenance. I'm sorry, in the equipment category. And then finally, down in the other operating expenses, that's that carpet cleaning I talked about. We subcontract that out, so we want to make sure we keep the place looking nice and get the best useful life that we can. So a lot of what we do, and Gary and his team really do a good job at this, is we look at cost management savings, and carpet cleaning is one of those, like I just talked about. Being able to clean those carpets and get a longer useful life out of those will help us in our reserve study and help us on that asset, not having to replace that. So that's one of the things that we do. Some of the other things we do is we do a lot of price shopping for things like, even in Lizard Acres with the beer and the wine, making sure we're trying to get the best return we can and provide the best value that we can to our community. Try to squeeze every nickel that we can out of the Sports Pavilion, out of the Lizard Acres, to help fund that facility and provide a nice amenity for our community. And there's other things like leveraging technology, anywhere we can to help us report and give us data to help us make decisions about types of bowling that we put on, tournaments and events, and then using strategic subcontract labor. There's many examples of that. If it turns out that we have a piece of equipment that our mechanics aren't necessarily qualified to do, we'll go and outsource that when we need to in those instances. So really, it is just a mindset that you have to have, and Gary and his team has it. And if you want to see some of the specific cost management measures for the whole community or for the whole association, I encourage you to go look at the attachment on the Budget and Finance Committee. There's 6 or 7 pages of cost management measures that we do here throughout the community. And Gary certainly is doing that as well. So with these expense increases, as I said, as I started the meeting off, we haven't done any. I mean, I think we added a non-league bowler, outside bowler rate last year. It was the only change we did to our rates. So we want to make sure we try and cover those expenses. And we really need to make sure that, you know, the type of facility, the world-class facility that we have, that we're making sure that we have the correct rates in there to help pay for all the enhancements that have been done. There's about a little over $1 million in this budget for the Sports Pavilion, and so that'll get returned in operating excess, which will go into the reserve fund. And looking at the rates, we're proposing a 6% increase overall in rates, specifically with bowling fees, an overall 7% increase, and that'll generate an additional $65,000 in revenue for us. And we're gonna budget the lineage that we have, that we're projecting for this year. We're gonna budget that for next year as well, $311,000. So the $65,000, if we look at what's really contributing to that, is we're going to look at our resident and league bowling rate. We're going to increase that by 25 cents. Okay, so attached to this budget is a budget packet with a rate sheet, and it'll show the exact rates, the comparison year over year. So we're looking at a 25-cent per line increase in our bowling and resident and league bowling, and then our non-resident bowling, we're going to increase that by 50 cents. Okay, and then we're going to look at our non-resident league card holders. And those card holders are going to be increased by $10. Those cards are going to be now $40. Okay? And then on the locker rental side, we're going to increase the locker rates. For members, we'll increase it by 5. And for non-members, we'll increase it by 10. So we're going to have 2 rates now, member and non-member locker rental rates. And then our shoe rental rates, we haven't increased that in a while. We're going to increase that to $3. That really impacts that show up and open bowling, those types of things, and so that's what we're looking at. So all those things combined will generate an additional $65,000 in this budget to help cover those increased costs. So overall, we anticipate in this budget finishing this year at $124,000 and then finishing next year at $152,000, a $28,000 increase over prior year. Again, we're really trying to be mindful of, we appreciate the fact that the Sports Pavilion does have an excess in the Sports Pavilion after they pay for operations. And we want to be also mindful that we help pay for some of the enhancements that we've made to that facility. Because between this year and 2 years ago, it's 1.6 or 1.7 million that we've invested between the lanes and the bowling and the ball returns and all the things that are in this budget, the pin setters and everything, and just kind of looking at everything, we want to make sure that we're helping to pay for those things, and we're doing the right thing there for the community as a whole. So just a couple, want to plug just some important dates. So we've got some dates coming up. We'll be presenting the overall budget on Friday to the governing board for the first time. On the 20th, we'll have some more discussion with the governing board. And then we'll have our public forums on, well, first, let me back up. On April 17th, the governing board is going to vote on capital. So that's the CIP stuff that Director Rhodes was talking about earlier. And then on the 24th and the 25th, we'll hold our public forums for the community. And then on May 22nd, we'll have our final approval from the governing board on our annual financial plan. So that concludes my presentation. And turn it over to you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Swan? Carol Card?
I have a couple of questions. The first one being the merit wage increase. Is that an annual consideration?
Yes. So there's the merit increase really does 2 things for us. First of all, it helps us stay on the market for our employees. And so that's one thing that it does. The other thing that it does is it gives us an opportunity to address certain areas of concern. So if we're getting high turnover in a certain area of position or a division, we can address those, and sometimes it requires an adjustment that goes beyond the 4%. So we use the 4% as an overall bucket to address all these different things. And then finally, along the lines of retention, employee retention. We use that to make sure that we're rewarding or making sure that the people that go above and beyond in their roles, that we have the money to compensate them for such things. So that's really what it's for.
I didn't know if that was a catch-up because the minimum wage increased.
It will help us. So when the minimum wage goes up, that's a good, thank you for bringing that up, because that's one of the other things that we have to address when we have positions that are at minimum wage, and we have quite a few. And to be honest, if we didn't hire within the community, we probably wouldn't have as many, because we'd have to go higher than minimum wage for a lot of these positions. So we do have the benefit of being able to pull from the community because they live here, they can drive less than 1 mile to work, and there's just, they're giving back to the community. There's a lot of just great benefits of that. So we're really blessed to be able to do that. But when Arizona increases their minimum wage, that creates a compression in the positions, especially 1 or 2 positions directly above minimum wage.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we do have to address those things. And depending how that comes in, we don't know. Those come out in September, so it's a complete wag when I put that amount in there. I mean, it's tied to the inflation rate or COLA, CPI. So we have an idea, but yes, that helps us address any concerns that might come from compression.
Okay, I had one more question. Locker rental rate, it increased $5 or $10, depending if it's member or non-member. What was it? What did it go from to?
If you go to the, there's in the budget packet attached to the presentation, so flip through a couple pages. Gary can speak exactly to it, but it's on there, what the rates are. You see the rate sheet?
The non-resident locker fees were $20 for a year, now to $25. And the non-residents were $25, and they're going to $35.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ryan?
Question I had is, in the budget, did you add in there any revenue that we would get from the sale of any of the equipment from bowling center, like the old oiling machines, any of the pin setters that we might be able to get money for?
I didn't. The reason that wouldn't go into the operating. That would go down in the capital section as a gain on sale. So that wouldn't be in the operating budget. And then we're anticipating we'll get something for those. We're not really sure. It's really more of a parts thing, so for people to buy and part out. So we're anticipating something, but again, that doesn't even offset. It offsets the cash,
right?
Okay, but it doesn't offset the price on the actual units, because we have to capitalize those at the actual price, and then we take that as a gain on sale.
Maybe getting something back out of that, though.
Yes, we anticipate getting something for sure.
Okay.
Mr. Kleckner?
Oh,
Get it
never
recorded.
mind. Okay, what I'd like some clarification on is how were these rates developed? In the package, you only show Sun City West with the resident and guest rate and shoe rental. And there's substantially more items than that in here, so then that leads me to the question, did you actually check what their rates were for the similar items that you're projecting here? That's one.
Okay.
Second, I don't know the exact figures, you probably could pull them out of your hat, but the majority of the revenue for bowling is from the leagues. And if the leagues are going up $0.25 a game a night for every bowler and every league, that is a substantial increase that I don't think considers then the residents that are coming in to bowl. In other words, the big money maker is leagues, so that's where you want to catch them. But you also want to get them in and get it interested. And I think that based on, how you've been at a positive revenue, why we want to increase these rates this much. And again, with no comparison against anybody else.
Okay, so we have different rate structures than Sun City. That's all I had to compare to. We kind of have a captive audience with our community, right? So the only place that they can go and bowl for under $4 a game is going to be either here or Sun City. So I'm not going to compare to some of the outside
Right.
bowling alleys, but that's really who we compare to. And again, keeping in mind that we haven't done any rate increases since
The last 2 years.
2023,
Right.
Which would have been not this current year, but the prior year. So we haven't done any rate increases to the community or to the league bowlers. We did increase the card rate, but we didn't increase the bowling rate. So it was time to do an increase. And as I said, we do create an excess, and we need that excess because we've done a lot of enhancements to that sports pavilion, and we feel like it's a fair increase. And in the grand scheme and looking at the whole picture of the whole association, the sports pavilion is one division, but it contributes to the whole
I agree with that.
association.
The other part of that is, like you talked about, our contribution to the general fund for the costs of business. But all that new equipment that we were talking about has all been in the budget for many years, growing. So theoretically, that money is already there. So we're not trying to replace it. We're trying to generate for new. And if we're already at a positive point, I'm just concerned that we're overtaxing a lot of people that have fixed incomes. That's basically what I'm concerned. I think we just need to think about this a little more and compare where we're at.
Okay.
Ms. Ryan?
Is that
Per game.
Hi, Chris Waller, 140-558. Is there any concern about the tariffs affecting like large purchases like the pin setters?
We priced these before the tariffs. I'm not concerned about it, but I'm not saying it wouldn't be a concern, but those change every day. I have no idea what's going to happen
I
next.
agree with you.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know whether their potential, if they're made in America potential, or if we're importing, if there's a
They're made in
potential on
Hungary?
large items.
They're made in Hungary.
Okay.
I'm not sure what our
I know, I would
I don't know if we have reciprocal tariffs with Hungary, but
I
yes,
just think
it's a good
interesting.
question. Yeah.
Last year we worried about a potential raise increase, which may or may not happen.
Yes.
And on large purchases like that, I think it's worthwhile to at least keep an eye on it, that it may affect, I'm sure that's labor and material, right?
Mhm.
That price. So
Yes.
assuming it's, 50-50, still be $150,000 difference, Thanks.
Do we have any other questions? Cliff, before you leave, I want to make a comment. After I spent 2.5 years on the Budget and Finance Committee, the one thing that I clearly understand is the reserve fund. And as Mr. Kleckner had said, this money is there. We knew this day would come, and we planned for it. So the money that we have in the reserve fund is evidence that is physical proof that we knew the day would come that we needed $882,000 for pin setters. So in theory, we could write that check tomorrow morning, and it would make zero difference to what we're proposing.
And the
because
reason
it's
yes.
there.
And the reason it's there is because we planned for it now. So
Right.
the inflow from operations that we have in this budget goes to fund in 25 years the replacement of the pin setters that are probably going to be 1.4 million. So it's a I don't want to call it a vicious cycle, but it's an ecosystem that just exists that has to continue to be funded. And even though we've replaced them currently and we have the funds currently to replace them, we need to make sure we have the funds down the road to replace them again.
This is called proactive planning, okay? So, thank you very much. I appreciate your work, Cliff. So, I don't know how appropriate this is, but I'm going to do it anyway. I looked at the schedule here that on April the 17th, the governing board is going to vote on the capital budget, which I want to back up one full item to go back to the capital budget. And I know that we all sat up here and talked about understanding the line items. Can we find that, Terry, yeah, that's it. That's what I want right there. This is the capital budget for the bowling alley, okay? And I want to make sure that and I'd like to go around, have every one of you tell me yes or no, that you understand this and that you're either supportive or not supportive of it, okay? Because I don't want to have any question that we did not discuss this at this committee. So, and I will repeat, anything under $50,000, the general manager has the authority to purchase. So we don't need to look at that. 50,000 to 100,000, we can approve or we can recommend. We don't approve. We can recommend that that we pull out specific line items. So there's only 3 of them there. And then the big one is the pin setters, the GSX pin setters at $892,000. So I would like to have you give me 2 separate acknowledgements, one for the 50 to 100,000 and the other for the pin setters. So Mr. Kleckner, I will ask you if you understand and you support these.
Yes,
Okay,
and I do support it.
thank you very much. Ms. Card?
I did not support it until Gary took us on that trek through the, yeah, and explained a lot of things and answered a lot of my questions and concerns. Therefore, I do fully support it now.
Thank you. Ms. Orion?
100% support. 100% support. 100% support both.
Thank you. Ms. Coker?
I support them both.
She has laryngitis, and I can interpret for her. She says, I support them both. So,
I support them both, and I think they're overdue and needed and necessary.
thank you very much. Okay, the next item that we have is item 4.03, and it's non-resident bowling leagues. This deserves a bit of an explanation. Mr. Kleckner at our last meeting pointed out that, I guess you had heard that there was going to be a non-resident league starting in the summertime. And I said, okay, let's look at that, and make sure that, that it complies with our standards. So we couldn't substantiate that there's a new non-resident league that's starting. It was a rumor, and who knows where that came from. It's rumor central. But what we do know is that we have a league in the summertime that both residents and non-residents bowl in. So we sat down very carefully and we looked at our policy, and we specifically looked at policy B03, which is non-resident bowling. And the specific part that is germane is item 3.4. In all groups of 6 or less, including the bowler, at least one person must be 45 years of age or older. So in my discussions with Mr. Zarek, he was fully aware of that. As a matter of fact, he helped to bring it to my attention. And after we discussed it, we concluded that we are in compliance with our own policy. So that's really all we can, that's the resolution to that, is that we don't know anything about the rumor of a non-resident bowling league, but if we were approached by it, we would have to apply our own regulations and provisions before we could complete that. So to that point, I think we're going to put that to rest. Does anyone have questions on that? Mr. Kleckner?
Of course. First, you only referenced the non-resident bowling. You didn't reference the non-resident league bowling. That's a separate one. Additionally, clearly, in the bylaws of Sun City West, paragraph 4.18.17 says, determine in what manner and to what extent senior non-residents of Sun City West living in the neighboring communities may extend association bowling privileges. It doesn't say anything about junior bowlers or young adults or anybody else. It only talks about senior non-residents. There's a specific line in the bylaws. Now, in our paragraph, your BO3, it says the policy establishes the parameters by which non-residents of Sun City West may participate in non-resident bowling at the Sports Pavilion. Non-residents are defined as those individuals 45 years of age or older and do not have resident cards. So we say senior non-resident, we describe a senior non-resident as 45 years or older.
Omitted was item 3.5,
which violates the
what
bylaw.
what you omitted, let me finish, please. What you omitted was item 3.5 that says non-residents 18 years old and under must at all times be accompanied by an adult ages 45 plus.
Right, I agree. And
I'm not sure what you're trying to tell me, because
I'm trying to tell you that people that are under 45 years of age can't move here.
We've been through this. We talked about this earlier in the year. You know, the committee actually even came to consensus on that we did not read it the same way you're reading it, that we have authority to permit a non-resident under 45 as long as they're accompanied by a 45-year-old person. That specifically states that in here. And I'm not sure what else. We've been over this and over this and over this, and I'm not sure what we're trying to conclude here, other than you don't want somebody under 45 in here to bowl.
Okay. Recently, in a bowling league, a person that was under 45 years of age was terminated from the league because they were 44. That person was the pro shop's front counter person. So, I mean, I'm saying that we all that bowl there know the 45 age limit.
Well, so what are you trying to tell me, that you're going to find individual cases where we don't comply with our own record?
No, I'm just saying. I'm just saying that the purpose of this community is for seniors, not people that are young. The reason we live here is because we want to be with people like us.
And we have that provision accounted for in here,
okay,
in this policy.
I just disagree with you.
Okay, I don't know what I'm gonna turn it over to the balance of the committee. And, you know, I'm gonna start with, do you have any comments at all on this, Ms. Gingrich?
During our winter leagues, there are specific rules that leagues will create related to specific things. The individual we are discussing happened to bowl in a league where there was a very specific age-related rule, and it was missed, and that individual was allowed to bowl. It was brought to my attention. I happen to be the president of that league, and it was brought to my attention. We addressed it. It was resolved in her resignation. And we will move on from that and not, you know, it's over. This particular situation is a summer bowling group. And on a Tuesday evening, when they bowl at 7 o'clock at night, you could shoot a cannon through that bowling center and there wouldn't be anybody bowling. So, in all fairness, in how you interpret the situation, this particular situation is, if you want to generate some revenue for the future, this certainly has been allowed in the past. They have a very specific contract that I believe they signed, and there is a member of Sun City West who is certainly eligible aged, who is bowling with this group. It gives us revenue, and I think it's conducive that if we want to continue to strive to have a bowling center that is active all year round, not just during the winter and spring, that we look at situations like this and try to resolve it as best as we can.
But do they comply with the bowling, with the 45-year-old?
It depends on how you interpret things.
Well, I mean, our policy says.
I agree with that,
And that's
and I
the
can sort of
policy.
agree with Pete.
So the
I
second
think we
question
look
is,
at-
are we enforcing our policy?
Yeah, we are.
aren't. So we have a policy, we're addressing it. Then the question is, are we enforcing it? Because if we're not enforcing it, that doesn't mean the policy's bad. That means we're just not enforcing it.
We're enforcing it.
Okay. Ms. Coker? Nothing. Mr. Ryan?
I understand what Sherry's saying because I've heard, talk to her about it. So I think the revenue is more important than anything else. I mean, as long as we follow the policy.
The question is not the revenue. Because we could, if we weren't in compliance with the policy, the revenue goes by the wayside. That's not the question. Yeah. I didn't think I'd ever want to say that as a finance guy. Yeah. But it isn't. In this case, it's the policy. The policy says, and I think the revenue is a secondary issue. It's a benefit, but it's secondary.
So this is more of a question of
policy. Are we
policy.
Following our
Are
own
we following
our
the
own
policy on that league?
policy?
And you don't feel that the policy's been followed?
No, he doesn't like the policy.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
I can't.
I don't agree that we're following the bylaws. I think they take precedence over the policies.
You're bringing up totally different issue because you're bringing up the issue that we talked about 6 months ago.
Okay. Are you calling on me to talk?
Not yet.
No. Okay.
Are you finished?
Yeah.
Ms. Card?
At our last meeting, this issue came up and it's been discussed on social media, and the public has weighed in on this particular issue, and they very much were not in favor of having this league continue. So therefore, I do think we owe them some sort of explanation as to how we all stand on this. At the previous meeting, finances came up as a reason that this league was allowed to exist. because without them, it probably would be empty on that evening. Having said that, I do think this would be a wonderful opportunity for Gary to do some of his magic and say, hey, community, you've complained for years, you don't have the opportunity to bowl. Come and bowl this night. All the lanes are open. You could have specials. You could do lots of things to encourage the people. And it also would appease some of those people who are saying, we just can't get in there to bowl because the leagues take over all the lanes. Having said that, I do think there's a distinction between the bylaws and the policies. Now, the copy that I have has that policy redlined that you're referring to, Dick. And to me, I don't think we are following the policy.
Mr. Kleckner, you've already commented, but if you wish to add more, you may.
Okay. Just a couple things. One, the policy statement that you read from has to do with open bowling. There is a separate policy for bowling leagues. Second, the league that I was talking about was not the Tuesday night league. It was a Thursday night league that wants to come to Sun City West. They asked that they could bowl on Thursday night at 9 o'clock after the bowling alley closes. They asked that, now this is informally, I don't know if they've ever contacted Gary. I believe they have, but I could be wrong. But they want to move up the Thursday Pioneer League up to 5 o'clock or earlier so that they can have time to re-oil the lanes before a 9 o'clock league. The league that they have is over at Sun City and has a substantial amount of people under 45 years of age. So the two things were, why do we want to be open after 9 o'clock at night? And then two, in this particular case, is bringing youthful bowlers into the community.
Okay, those are all issues that were not brought up last time because the last meeting you talked about a rumor you had heard that we're going to have under 45 non-resident bowlers here. The whole issue of after hours, that's completely different. That's completely different, and that's a scenario that Mr. Zarek will have to defend. And I am at a loss here because we have a policy. And the policy is, I just read it, that says that in a non-resident bowler, whether they're league bowler or a non-league bowler, is still a non-resident bowler, okay? And the league, all the league's gonna do is gonna decide, you know, what rate they're gonna be charged. It just so happens that we charge the same, well, for league and non-league, and resident and non-resident. I'm not sure what to do. I mean, I see zero issue here because we've covered everything. Now, what does the committee want to do? If you want to make a recommendation, if you want to submit something to say that our bylaws are wrong, that our policies are wrong, you know, you're going to have to come to some kind of closure with that because I see absolutely nothing that we're doing here that is not in direct compliance with our own policy. Now, enforcement's a different story. Enforcing the policy is completely different. But we have authority, given what I've read, to have a non-resident bowler here as long as they have, and it specifically says, as long as they have at least one person out of 6 that is over 45 or above. So, yes? Okay. Wait 1 second. The question was, is a non-resident have to buy a card to be on the league? Does a non-resident? They do. Okay. Do we sell them to people that are under 45?
Only for the Tuesday night summer league.
Only for the Tuesday night summer league. Okay. And your authorization there is what I read, the 3.4. Okay.
And they
They pay a $15 non-resident card because they are only bowling in our center for approximately 10 weeks.
Somebody tell me where we are here, because I know what direction I want to go. We need to move on. Mr. Swan?
Thank you. I would say that we are in compliance with the policy. If you don't agree that the policy aligns with the bylaws, okay, the bylaws state that the general manager has flexibility to operate within, can set the parameters for senior non-league bowlers. One of those parameters that is set is that senior non-league bowlers or senior bowlers can bring other bowlers in a group as long as there's a senior bowler. That's a parameter that is set in the policy. So we're within the bylaws and we're within the policies. Now, if you don't like the policy, then that's a policy change. That's different. But we are in compliance with the bylaws because the bylaws state that the policies dictate, generated by this committee and the general manager, dictate how we handle senior bowlers. And how we handle senior bowlers currently, according to policy, is that they're allowed to bring non-members up to 6, as long as one of those non-members is 45. So I'm only saying that we are within policy. If you don't like the policy, and we are within the bylaw, if you don't like it, then change the policy. That's all I'm saying. I want to be clear because I don't want it to get out that we're not following the policies and that the policies don't align with the bylaws, because they do. They're set, the bylaw states, the parameters are set for a 45-year-old or a senior bowler that's a non-member are set by the policy and the general manager. And that's the policy that exists. So if the policy isn't, this committee doesn't like the policy, you can change that. Okay? That's all I have.
So what you're saying is the general manager has the authority to delineate, to make those decisions on the conditions of who's going to.
Based on the bylaws.
Based on, thank you. So now, does anyone in the room have a question? Does anyone in the room have a question? Anyone online have a question? Just as a point of information, Mr. Falcone is online. Mr. Falcone, we hope that you're feeling better. He supports leaving all of the items in the proposed budget. So that goes back to what we talked about earlier, so that's unanimous. Okay. And then we do have a person that said the policy is ridiculous. Okay. Okay. So we're going to now start with committee comments. Mr. Kleckner, we'll start with you.
None.
Ms. Card?
I think that policy is a disgrace to the members of this community.
Is it right?
No further comments.
No comments from Ms. Coker?
As we conclude our league season, I want to commend Gary and his staff and all the new people that have been manning the desk, the mechanics and keeping everything going as best as they can. There's been some hiccups some nights, but I tell you what, considering the amount of bowlers, the amount of different types of bowlers, the fact that sometimes there's 6 balls that are stuck in the back and then everybody goes, whoops. And then the poor mechanic is ripping up the lanes to try to find the pin, it's blocking all the balls from coming back. Everybody does a great job. Bowling on Friday nights, hearing the music coming out of Lizard Acres, seeing the people going in there. There's a lot of good this community brings, and that Sports Pavilion provides that. Now, we can disagree on a lot of policy-related things, but you'll see little kids coming in with their grandparents. You'll see mothers and fathers bringing their babies to watch tournaments. So we do provide a lot, and we might complain about how things maybe don't go as well as they should. But you know what? It's still a great place to live, and I will continue to support the bowling center. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the room? No comments online? Okay. Our next committee meeting will be April the 9th. It'll be at 1:30 here in the lecture hall. And I adjourn this meeting at 2:39.